For Whom the Bell Tolls, Chapter 28, by Ernest Hemingway. After the planes went away, Robert Jordan and Primitivo heard the firing start, and his heart seemed to start again with it. A cloud of smoke drifted over the last ridge that he could see in the high country, and the planes were 3 steadily receding specks in the sky. They've probably bombed the hell out of their own cavalry and never touched Sordo and company, Robert Jordan said to himself. The damn planes scare you to death, but they don't kill you. The combat goes on, Primitivo said, listening to the heavy firing. He had winced at each bomb thud, and now he licked his dry lips. Why not? Robert Jordan said. Those things never kill anybody. Then the firing stopped absolutely, and he did not hear another shot. Lieutenant Berrendo's pistol shot did not carry that far. When the firing first stopped, it did not affect him. Then, as the quiet kept on, a hollow feeling came in his chest. Then he heard the grenades burst, and for a moment his heart rose. Then everything was quiet again, and the quiet kept on, and he knew that it was over. Maria came up from the camp with a tin bucket of stewed hare with mushrooms, sunken in the rich gravy, and a sack with bread, a leather wine bottle, 4 tin plates, 2 cups, and 4 spoons. She stopped at the gun and ladled out 2 plates for Agustin and Eladio, who had replaced Anselmo at the gun, and gave them bread and unscrewed the horn tip of the wine bottle and poured 2 cups of wine. Robert Jordan watched her climbing lithely up to his lookout post, the sack over her shoulder, the bucket in one hand, her cropped head bright in the sun. He climbed down and took the bucket and helped her up the last boulder. What did the aviation do? She asked, her eyes frightened. Bombed Sordo. He had the bucket open and was ladling out stew onto a plate. Are they still fighting? No. It is over. Oh, she said, and bit her lip and looked out across the country. I have no appetite, Primitivo said. Eat anyway, Robert Jordan told him. I could not swallow food. Take a drink of this, man, Robert Jordan said, and handed him the wine bottle. Then eat. This of Sordo has taken away desire, Primitivo said. Eat thou. I have no desire. Maria went over to him and put her arms around his neck and kissed him. Eat, old one, she said. Each one should take care of his strength. Primitivo turned away from her. He took the wine bottle and, tipping his head back, swallowed steadily while he squirted a jet of wine into the back of his mouth. Then he filled his plate from the bucket and commenced to eat. Robert Jordan looked at Maria and shook his head. She sat down by him and put her arm around his shoulder. Each knew how the other felt, and they sat there. And Robert Jordan ate the stew, taking time to appreciate the mushrooms completely. And he drank the wine, and they said nothing. You may stay here, Guapa, if you want, he said, after a while, when the food was all eaten. Nay, she said, I must go to Pilar. It is all right to stay here. I do not think that anything will happen now. Nay, I must go to Pilar. She is giving me instruction. What does she give thee? Instruction. She smiled at him and then kissed him. Did you never hear of religious instruction? She blushed. It is something like that. She blushed again. But different. Go to thy instruction, he said, and patted her on the head. She smiled at him again, then said to Primitivo, Do you want anything from below? No, daughter, he said. They both saw that he was still not yet recovered. Salute, old one, she said to him. Listen, Primitivo said. I have no fear to die, but to leave them alone, thus. His voice broke. There was no choice, Robert Jordan told him. I know, but all the same. There was no choice, Robert Jordan repeated, and now it is better not to speak of it. Yes, but there, alone, with no aid from us. Much better not to speak of it, Robert Jordan said. And thou, Guapa, get thee to thy instruction. He watched her climb down the rocks. Then he sat there for a long time, thinking and watching the high country. Primitivo spoke to him, but he did not answer. It was hot in the sun, but he did not notice the heat while he sat watching the hill slopes and the long patches of pine trees that stretched up the highest slope. An hour passed, and the sun was far to his left now, when he saw them coming over the crest of the slope, and he picked up his glasses. The horses showed small and minute as the first two riders came into sight on the long green slope of the high hill. Then there were 4 more horsemen coming down, spread out across the wide hill, and then through his glasses he saw the double column of men and horses ride into the sharp clarity of his vision. As he watched them, he felt sweat come from his armpits and run down his flanks. One man rode at the head of the column. Then came more horsemen. Then came the riderless horses, with their burdens, tied across the saddles. Then there were 2 riders. Then came the wounded with men walking by them as they rode. Then came more cavalry to close the column. Robert Jordan watched them ride down the slope and out of sight into the timber. He could not see at that distance the load one saddle bore of a long rolled poncho, tied at each end and at intervals, so that it bulged between each lashing as a pod bulges with peas. This was tied across the saddle, and at each end it was lashed to the stirrup leathers. Alongside this, on the top of the saddle, the automatic rifle Sordo had served was lashed arrogantly. Lieutenant Berrendo, who was riding at the head of the column, his flankers out, his point pushed well forward, felt no arrogance. He felt only the hollowness that comes after action. He was thinking, taking the heads is barbarous, but proof and identification is necessary. I will have trouble enough about this as it is, and who knows? These of the heads may appeal to them. There are those of them who like such things. It is possible they will send them all to Burgos. It is a barbarous business. The plains were much, but we could have done it all, and almost without losses, with a Stokes mortar, 2 mules to carry the shells, and a mule with a mortar on each side of the pack saddle. What an army we should be then, with the firepower of all these automatic weapons and another mule, no, 2 mules to carry ammunition. Leave it alone, he told himself. It is no longer cavalry. Leave it alone. You're building yourself an army. Next, you will want a mountain gun. Then he thought of Julian, dead on the hill, dead now, tied across a horse there in the first troop. And as he rode down into the dark pine forest, leaving the sunlight behind him on the hill, riding now in the quiet dark of the forest, he started to say a prayer for him again. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, he started, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we send up our sighs, mournings and weepings in this valley of tears. He went on with the prayer, and the horse's hooves soft on the fallen pine needles, the light coming through the tree trunks in patches as it comes through the columns of a cathedral. And as he prayed, he looked ahead to see his flankers riding through the trees. He rode out of the forest onto the yellow road that led into La Granja, and the horses' hooves raised a dust that hung over them as they rode. It powdered the dead who were tied face down across the saddles, and the wounded, and those who walked beside them were in thick dust. It was here that Anselmo saw them ride past in their dust. He counted the dead and the wounded, and he recognized Sordo's automatic rifle. He did not know what the poncho-wrapped bundle was which flapped against the led horse's flanks as the stirrup leather swung, but when on his way home he came in the dark onto the hill where Sordo had fought, he knew at once what the long poncho roll contained. In the dark he could not tell who had been up on the hill, but he counted those that lay there and then made off across the hills for Pablo's camp. Walking alone in the dark, with a fear like a freezing of his heart from the feeling the holes of the bomb craters had given him, from them and from what he had found on the hill, he put all thought of the next day out of his mind. He simply walked as fast as he could to bring the news. And as he walked, he prayed for the souls of Sordo and of all his band. It was the first time he had prayed since the start of the movement. Most kind, most sweet, most clement Virgen, he prayed. But he could not keep from thinking of the next day finally, so he thought, I will do exactly as the Ingles says, and as he says to do it, but let me be close to him, O Lord, and may his instructions be exact, for I do not think that I could control myself under the bombardment of the planes. Help me, O Lord, tomorrow to comport myself as a man should in his last hours. Help me, O Lord, to understand clearly the needs of the day. Help me, O Lord, to dominate the movement of my legs that I should not run when the bad moment comes. Help me, O Lord, to comport myself as a man tomorrow in the day of battle. Since I have asked this aid of thee, please grant it, knowing I would not ask it if it were not serious, and I will ask nothing more of thee again. Walking in the dark alone, he felt much better from having prayed, and he was sure now that he would comport himself well. Walking now down from the high country, he went back to praying for the people of Sordo, and in a short time he had reached the upper post where Fernando challenged him. It is I, he answered. Anselmo. Good, Fernando said. You know of this of Sordo, old one? Anselmo asked Fernando, the two of them standing at the entrance of the big rocks in the dark. Why not? Fernando said. Pablo has told us. He was up there? Why not? Fernando said stolidly. He visited the hill as soon as the cavalry left. He told you? He told us all, Fernando said. What barbarians these fascists are. We must do away with all such barbarians in Spain. He stopped, then said bitterly, in them is lacking all conception of dignity. Anselmo grinned in the dark. An hour ago, he could not have imagined that he would ever smile again. What a marvel that Fernando, he thought. Yes, he said to Fernando, we must teach them. We must take away their planes, their automatic weapons, their tanks, their artillery, and teach them dignity. Exactly, Fernando said. I am glad that you agree. Anselmo left him standing there, alone with his dignity, and went on down to the cave. Chapter 29. Anselmo found Robert Jordan sitting at the plank table inside the cave, with Pablo opposite him. They had a bowl poured full of wine between them, and each had a cup of wine on the table. Robert Jordan had his notebook out, and he was holding a pencil. Pilar and Maria were in the back of the cave, out of sight. There was no way for Anselmo to know what the woman was keeping the girl back there to keep her from hearing the conversation, and he thought that it was odd that Pilar was not at the table. Robert Jordan looked up as Anselmo came in under the blanket that hung over the opening. Pablo stared straight at the table. His eyes were focused on the wine bowl, but he was not seeing it. "I come from above," Anselmo said to Robert Jordan. "Pablo has told us," Robert Jordan said. "There were 6 dead on the hill, and they had taken the heads," Anselmo said. "I sat there in the dark." Robert Jordan nodded. Pablo sat there looking at the wine bowl and saying nothing. There was no expression on his face, and his small pig eyes were looking at the wine bowl as though he had never seen one before. "Sit down," Robert Jordan said to Anselmo. The old man sat down at the table on one of the hide-covered stools, and Robert Jordan reached under the table and brought up the pinch bottle of whiskey that had been the gift of Sordo. It was about half full. Robert Jordan reached down the table for a cup and poured a drink of whiskey into it and shoved it along the table to Anselmo. "Drink that, old one," he said. Pablo looked from the wine bowl to Anselmo's face as he drank, and then he looked back at the wine bowl. As Anselmo swallowed the whiskey, he felt a burning in his nose, his eyes, and his mouth, then a happy, comforting warmth in his stomach. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he looked at Robert Jordan and said, "Can I have another?" "Why not?" Robert Jordan said, and poured another drink from the bottle and handed it this time instead of pushing it. This time there was not the burning when he swallowed, but the warm comfort doubled. It was as good a thing for his spirit as a saline injection is for a man who has suffered a great hemorrhage. The old man looked toward the bottle again. "The rest is for tomorrow," Robert Jordan said. "What passed on the road, old one?" "There was much movement," Anselmo said. "I have it all noted down as you showed me. I have one watching for me and noting now. Later I will go for her report." "Did you see anti-tank guns? Those on rubber tires with the long barrels?" "Yes," Anselmo said. "There were 4 camions which passed on the road. In each of them was such a gun with pine branches spread across barrels. In the trucks rode 6 men with each gun." "4 guns, you say?" Robert Jordan asked him. "4," Anselmo said. He did not look at his papers. "Tell me what else went up the road." While Robert Jordan noted, Anselmo told him everything he had seen move past him on the road. He told him from the beginning and in order with the wonderful memory of those who cannot read or write. And twice, while he was talking, Pablo reached out for more wine from the bowl. "There was also the cavalry which entered La Granja from the high country, where El Sordo fought," Anselmo went on. Then he told the number of the wounded he had seen and the number of the dead across the saddles. "There was a bundle packed across one saddle that I did not understand," he said, "but now I know it was the heads." He went on without pausing. "It was a squadron of cavalry. They had only 1 officer left. He was not the one who was here in the early morning when you were by the gun. He must have been one of the dead. 2 of the dead were officers by their sleeves. They were lashed down over the saddles, their arms hanging. Also, they had the máquina del sordo tied to the saddle that bore the heads. The barrel was bent. That is all," he finished. "It is enough," Robert Jordan said, and dipped his cup into the wine bowl. "Who beside you has been through the lines to the side of the Republic?" "Andres and Eladio." "Which is the better of those 2? "Andres." "How long would it take him to get to Navacerrada from here?" "Carrying no pack and taking his precautions, in 3 hours with luck, we came by a longer, safer route because of the materia. He can surely make it? No sé. There's no such thing as surely. Not for thee either? Nay? That decides it, Robert Jordan thought to himself. If he had said that he could make it surely, I would have sent him. Andres can get there as well as thee. As well or better, he's younger. But this must absolutely get there. If nothing happens, he will get there. If anything happens, it could happen to anyone. I will write a dispatch and send it by him, Robert Jordan said. I will explain to him where he can find the general. He will be at the Estado Mayor of the division. He will not understand all these subdivisions and all, Anselmo said. Always has it confused me. He should have the name of the general and where he can be found. But it is at the Estado Mayor of the division that he will be found. But is that not a place? Certainly it is a place, old one, Robert Jordan explained patiently, but it is a place the general will have selected. It is where he will make his headquarters for the battle. Where is it then? Anselmo was tired, and the tiredness was making him stupid. Also, words like brigades, divisions, army corps confused him. First, there had been columns. Then there were regiments. Then there were brigades. Now there were brigades and divisions both. He did not understand. A place was a place. Take it slowly, old one, Robert Jordan said. He knew that if he could not make Anselmo understand, he could never explain it clearly to Andres either. The Estado Mayor of the division is a place the general will have picked to set up his organization to command. He commands a division, which is 2 brigades. I do not know where it is because I was not there when it was picked. It will probably be a cave or dugout, a refuge, and wires will run to it. Andres must ask for the general and for the Estado Mayor of the division. He must give this to the general or to the chief of his Estado Mayor or to another whose name I will write. One of them will surely be there, even if the others are out inspecting the preparations for the attack. Do you understand now? Yes. Then get Andres, and I will write it now and seal it with this seal. He showed him the small, round, wooden-backed rubber stamp with the seal of the SIM and the round, tin-covered inking pad, no bigger than a 50-cent piece he carried in his pocket. That seal they will honor. Get Andres now, and I will explain to him. He must go quickly, but first he must understand. He will understand if I do, but you must make it very clear. These of staffs and the visions is a mystery to me. Always I have gone to such things as definite places such as a house. In Navacerrada, it is in the old hotel where the place of command is. In Guadarrama, it is in a house with a garden. With this general, Robert Jordan said, it will be someplace very close to the lines. It will be underground to protect from the planes. Andres will find it easily by asking if he knows what to ask for. He will only need to show what I have written, but fetch him now, for this should get there quickly. Anselmo went out, ducking under the hanging blanket. Robert Jordan commenced writing in his notebook. Listen, Inglés, Pablo said, still looking at the wine bowl. I am writing, Robert Jordan said without looking up. Listen, Inglés. Pablo spoke directly to the wine bowl. There is no need to be disheartened in this. Without Sordo, we have plenty of people to take the post and blow thy breach. Good, Robert Jordan said, without stopping writing. Plenty, Pablo said. I have admired thy judgment much today, Inglés. Pablo told the wine bowl. I think thou hast much picardia, that thou art smarter than I am. I have confidence in thee. Concentrating on his report to Goltz, trying to put it in the fewest words and still make it absolutely convincing, trying to put it so the attack would be cancelled absolutely, yet convince them he wasn't trying to have it called off because of any fears he might have about the danger of his own mission, but wished only to put them in possession of all the facts, Robert Jordan was hardly half listening. "Inglés," Pablo said. "I am writing," Robert Jordan told him without looking up. I probably should send 2 copies, he thought. But if I do, we will not have enough people to blow it if I have to blow it. What do I know about why this attack is made? Maybe it is only a holding attack. Maybe they want to draw those troops from somewhere else. Maybe they make it to draw those planes from the north. Maybe that is what it is about. Perhaps it's not expected to succeed. What do I know about it? This is my report to Goltz. I do not blow the bridge until the attack starts. My orders are clear, and if the attack is called off, I blow nothing. But I've got to keep enough people here for the bare minimum necessary to carry the orders out. What did you say? He asked Pablo. That I have confidence, Inglés. Pablo was still addressing the wine ball. Man, I wish I had, Robert Jordan thought. He went on writing. Chapter 30. So now, everything had been done that there was to do that night. All orders had been given. Everyone knew exactly what he was to do in the morning. Andres had been gone 3 hours. Either it would come now with the coming of the daylight, or it would not come. I believe it will come, Robert Jordan told himself, walking back down from the upper post where he had gone to speak to Primitivo. Goltz makes the attack, but he has not the power to cancel it. Permission to cancel it will have to come from Madrid. The chances are they won't be able to wake anybody up there, and if they do wake up, they will be too sleepy to think. I should have gotten word to Goltz sooner of the preparations they have made to meet the attack, but how could I send word about something until it happened? They did not move up that stuff until just at dark. They did not want to have any movement on the road spotted by planes. But what about all their planes? What about those fascist planes? Surely our people must have been warned by them, but perhaps the fascists were faking for another offensive down through Guadalajara with them. They were supposed to be Italian troops concentrated in Soria and at Singüenza again, besides those operating in the north. They haven't enough troops or material to run 2 major offenses at the same time, though. That is impossible. So it must be just a bluff. But we know how many troops the Italians have landed all last month and the month before at Cadiz. It is always possible that they will try again at Guadalajara, not stupidly as before, but with 3 main fingers coming down to broaden it out and carry it along the railway to the west of the plateau. There was a way that they could do it all right. Hans had shown him. They made many mistakes the first time. The whole conception was unsound. They had not used any of the same troops in the Arganda offensive against the Madrid-Valencia road that they used at Guadalajara. Why had they not made those same drives simultaneously? Why? Why? When would we know why? Yet, we had stopped them both times with the very same troops. We never could have stopped them if they had pulled both drives at once. Don't worry, he told himself. Look at the miracles that have happened before this. Either you will have to blow that bridge in the morning, or you will not have to. But do not start deceiving yourself into thinking you won't have to blow it. You will blow it one day, or you will blow it another. Or, if it is not this bridge, it will be some other bridge. It is not you who decides what shall be done. You follow orders. Follow them. And do not try to think beyond them. The orders on this are very clear. Too very clear. But you must not worry, nor must you be frightened. For if you allow yourself the luxury of normal fear, that fear will infect those who must work with you. But that head's business was quite a thing all the same, he told himself. And the old man running onto them on the hilltop alone, how would you have liked to run onto them like that? That impressed you, didn't it? Yes, that impressed you, Jordan. You've been quite impressed more than once today. But you've behaved okay. So far, you've behaved all right. You do very well for an instructor in Spanish at the University of Montana, he joked at himself. You do all right for that, but do not start to thinking that you are anything very special. You haven't gotten very far in this business. Just remember Duran, who never had any military training and who was a composer and lad about town before the movement, and is now a damn good general commanding a brigade. It was all as simple and easy to learn and understand to Duran as chess to a child chess prodigy. You had read on and studied the art of war ever since you were a boy, and your grandfather had started you on the American Civil War. Except that grandfather always called it the War of the Rebellion. But compared with Duran, you were like a good, sound chess player against a boy prodigy, old Duran. It would be good to see Duran again. He would see him at Gaylord's after this was over. Yes, after this was over. See how well he was behaving? I'll see him at Gaylord's, he said to himself again, after this is over. Don't kid yourself, he said. You do it all perfectly okay. Cold, without kidding yourself. You aren't going to see Duran anymore, and it is of no importance. Don't be that way either, he told himself. Don't go in for any of those luxuries. Not for heroic resignation either. We do not want any citizens full of heroic resignation in these hills. Your grandfather fought 4 years in our Civil War, and you are just finishing your first year in this war. You have a long time to go yet, and you are very well fitted for the work. And now you have Maria too. Why, you've got everything. You shouldn't worry. What is a little brush between a guerrilla band and a squadron of cavalry? That isn't anything. What if they took the heads? Does that make any difference? None at all. The Indians always took the scalps when grandfather was at Fort Kearny after the war. Do you remember the cabinet in your father's office with the arrowheads spread out on a shelf, and the eagle feathers of the war bonnets that hung on the wall, their plumes slanting, the smoked buckskin smell of the leggings, and the shirts, and the feel of the beaded moccasins? Do you remember the great stave of the buffalo bow that leaned in a corner of the cabinet, and the 2 quivers of hunting and war arrows, and how the bundle of shafts felt when you closed your hand around them? Remember something like that. Remember something concrete and practical. Remember grandfather's saber, bright and well oiled in its dented scabbard, and grandfather showed you how the blade had been thinned from the many times it had been to the grinders. Remember grandfather's Smith & Wesson? It was a single-action officer's model .32 caliber, and there was no trigger guard. It had the softest, sweetest trigger pull you had ever felt, and it was always well oiled, and the bore was clean, although the finish was all worn off, and the brown metal of the barrel and the cylinder was worn smooth from the leather of the holster. It was kept in the holster with a U.S. on the flap, in a drawer in the cabinet with its cleaning equipment and 200 rounds of cartridges. Their cardboard boxes were wrapped and tied neatly with waxed twine. You could take the pistol out of the drawer and hold it. "Handle it freely," was grandfather's expression, but you could not play with it because it was a serious weapon. You asked Grandfather once if he'd ever killed anyone with it, and he said, yes. Then you said, when, Grandfather? And he said, in the War of the Rebellion. And afterwards. You said, will you tell me about it, Grandfather? And he said, I do not care to speak about it, Robert. Then, after your father had shot himself with this pistol, and you had come home from school, and they'd had the funeral, the coroner had returned it after the inquest, saying, Bob, I guess you might want to keep the gun. I'm supposed to hold it, but I know your dad set a lot of store by it, because his dad packed it all through the war. Besides, out here, when he first came out with the Cavalry, and it's still a hell of a good gun. I had her out trying her this afternoon. She don't throw much of a slug, but you can hit things with her. He had put the gun back in the drawer in the cabinet where it belonged. But the next day, he took it out, and he had ridden up to the top of the high country above Red Lodge with Chubb, where they had built the road to Cook City now over the pass and across the Beartooth Plateau. And up there, where the wind was thin and there was snow all summer on the hills, they had stopped by the lake, which was supposed to be 800 feet deep and was a deep green color, and Chubb held the two horses, and he climbed out on a rock and leaned over and saw his face in the still water, and saw himself holding the gun. And then he dropped it, holding it by the muzzle, and saw it go down, making bubbles until it was just as big as a watch charm in that clear water. And then it was out of sight. Then he came back off the rock, and when he was swung up into the saddle, he gave old Bess such a clout with the spurs she started to buck like an old rocking horse. He bucked her out along the shore of the lake, and as soon as she was reasonable, they went on back along the trail. I know why you did that with the old gun, Bob, Chubb said. Well, then we don't have to talk about it, he had said. They never talked about it, and that was the end of Grandfather's sidearms, except for the saber. He still had the saber in his trunk with the rest of his things at Missoula. I wonder what Grandfather would think of this situation, he thought. Grandfather was a hell of a good soldier, everybody said. They said if he had been with Custer that day, he never would have let him be sucked in that way. How could he ever not have seen the smoke, nor the dust of all those lodges down there in the draw, along the Little Bighorn, unless there must have been a heavy morning mist, but there wasn't any mist. I wish Grandfather were here instead of me. Well, maybe we will all be together by tomorrow night, if there should be any such damn fool business as a hereafter, and I'm sure there isn't, he thought. I would certainly like to talk to him, because there are a lot of things I would like to know. I have a right to ask him now because I have had to do the same sort of things myself. I don't think he'd mind my asking now. I had no right to ask before. I understand him not telling me because he didn't know me, but now I think we would get along all right. I'd like to be able to talk to him now and get his advice. Hell, if I didn't get advice, I'd just like to talk to him. It's a shame there is such a jump in time between ones like us. Then, as he thought, he realized that if there was any such thing as ever meeting, both he and his grandfather would be acutely embarrassed by the presence of his father. Anyone has a right to do it, he thought, but it isn't a good thing to do. I understand it, but I do not approve of it. Lache was the word, but you do understand it. Sure, I understand it, but, yes, but, you have to be awfully occupied with yourself to do a thing like that. Ah, hell, I wish Grandfather was here, he thought, for about an hour anyway. Maybe he sent me that what little I have through that other one that misused the gun. Maybe that is the only miscommunication that we have, but damn it, truly, damn it. I wish the time lag wasn't so long, so that I could have learned from him what the other one never had to teach me. But suppose the fear he had to go through and dominate and just get rid of finally in 4 years of that, and then in the Indian fighting, although in that mostly there couldn't have been so much fear, had made a cobarde out of the other one, the way second-generation bullfighters almost always are. Suppose that. And maybe the good juice only came through straight after passing through that one. I'll never forget how sick it made me feel the first time I knew he was a cobarde. Go on, say it in English. Coward. It's easier when you have said it, and there is never any point in referring to a son of a bitch by some foreign term. He wasn't any son of a bitch, though. He was just a coward. And that was the worst luck any man could have, because if he wasn't a coward, he would have stood up to that woman and not let her bully him. I wonder what I would have been like if he had married a different woman. That's something you'll never know, he thought, and grinned. Maybe the bully in her helped to supply what was missing in the other. And you, take it a little easy. Don't go referring to the good juice and other such things until you are through tomorrow. Don't be snotty too soon. And then, don't be snotty at all. We'll see what sort of juice you have tomorrow. But he started thinking about grandfather again. George Custer was not an intelligent leader of cavalry, Robert, his grandfather had said. He was not even an intelligent man. He remembered that when his grandfather said that he felt resentment that anyone could speak against that figure in the buckskin shirt, the yellow curls blowing, that stood on that hill, holding a service revolver as the Sioux closed in around him in the old Anheuser Busch lithograph that hung on the poolroom wall in Red Lodge. He just had a great ability to get himself in and out of trouble, his grandfather went on. And on the Little Bighorn, he got into it, but he couldn't get out. Now, Phil Sheridan was an intelligent man, and so was Jeb Stuart, but John Mosby was the finest cavalry leader that ever lived. He had a letter in his things in the trunk at Missoula from General Phil Sheridan to old Killy the Horse Kilpatrick that said his grandfather was a finer leader of irregular cavalry than John Mosby. I would tell Goltz about my grandfather, he thought. He wouldn't ever have heard of him, though. He probably never even heard of John Mosby. The British all had heard of them, though, because they had to study our Civil War much more than people did on the continent. Kharkov said after this was over, I could go to the Lenin Institute in Moscow if I wanted to. He said I could go to the military academy of the Red Army if I wanted to do that. I wonder what grandfather would think of that. Grandfather, who never knowingly sat at a table with a Democrat in his life. Well, I don't want to be a soldier, he thought. I know that, so that's out. I just want us to win this war. I guess really good soldiers are really good at very little else, he thought. That's obviously untrue. Look at Napoleon and Wellington. You're very stupid this evening, he thought. Usually, his mind was very good company, and tonight it had been when he thought about his grandfather. Then, thinking of his father, had thrown him off. He understood his father, and he forgave him everything, and he pitied him, but he was ashamed of him. You better not think at all, he told himself. Soon you will be with Maria, and you won't have to think. That's the best way now that everything is worked out. When you have been concentrating so hard on something you can't stop, and your brain gets to racing like a flywheel with the weight gone, you better just not think. But just suppose, he thought, just suppose that when the planes unload, they smash those anti-tank tank guns and just blow hell out of the positions. And the old tanks are all up good, whatever hill it is for once, and old goats, boots, that bunch of drunks, clochards, bums, fanatics, and heroes that make up the 14th Brigade ahead of him. And I know how good Duran's people are in Goltz's other brigade. And we are in Segovia tomorrow night. Yes, just suppose, he said to himself. I'll settle for La Granja, he told him. But you are going to have to blow that bridge. He suddenly knew absolutely. There won't be any calling off, because the way you have just been supposing there for a minute is how the possibilities of that attack look to those who have ordered it. Yes, you will have to blow the bridge. He knew, truly. Whatever happens to Andres doesn't matter. Coming down the trail, there in the dark, alone with the good feeling that everything that had to be done was over for the next 4 hours, and with the confidence that had come from thinking back to concrete things, the knowledge that he would surely have to blow the bridge came to him almost with comfort. The uncertainty, the enlargement of the feeling of being uncertain, as when, through a misunderstanding of possible dates, one does not know whether the guests are really coming to a party, that had been with him ever since he had dispatched Andres with the report to Goltz. That had all dropped from him now. He was sure now that the festival would not be cancelled. It's much better to be sure, he thought. It's always much better to be sure.